When the truth finally surfaced, it detonated through the Dupree community like an emotional bomb no one saw coming. Bill's decision to end his marriage wasn't just a scandal, it was the spark that exposed a web of secrets, betrayals, and hidden desires simmering beneath the polished surface of their perfect lives. What began as a private fracture inside one household has now become a chain reaction threatening reputations, alliances, and the fragile balance of power that holds this elite neighborhood together. And at the center of it all stands a shocking question: how far will each of them go to protect what's left of their lives when the masks finally fall? Bill moved through the silent corridors of the house he no longer recognized, feeling the walls closing in around him with every step. The photographs on the shelves, carefully curated images from anniversaries, fundraisers, family dinners, seemed to watch him like silent accusers. None of them reflected the person he had become, or the private storm he carried inside him. The decision to end his marriage had not come from a single moment, but from 1,000 small fractures that had slowly splintered into something irreparable. Yet beneath all those wounds, beneath the polite resentment and faded tenderness, there was one undeniable truth he kept hidden even from himself: Dani had become the gravitational force pulling him out of Hayley's orbit. He tried to convince himself that the marriage was already dead, that he was simply acknowledging its collapse rather than causing it. But every night he spent alone in the guest room, every morning he avoided Hayley's eyes across the breakfast table, reminded him that the truth was far more brutal. He was running. Not away from Hayley's faults, but towards something dangerously intoxicating, something that lived in Dani's presence, in her resilience, in her disarming vulnerability wrapped beneath sharp ambition. It wasn't love, or not the kind he could confess without shame. It was compulsion, the kind that erodes judgment and burrows into the soft places a man prefers to ignore. Hayley felt the shift long before Bill understood it himself. She sensed the distance in the way he lingered over his phone after midnight, the way he returned from work with a heaviness that didn't come from meetings or deadlines. She tried to anchor herself in routines, charity events, community planning, the quiet maintenance of her perfect home. But cracks spread beneath the surface like fractures in glass. She feared the truth, yet feared the unknown even more. Her life had been constructed upon stability, appearances, and the confidence that she and Bill were aligned even when they disagreed. That confidence now felt like a memory belonging to another woman. While Bill wrestled with guilt, Hayley was consumed by a different kind of turmoil, the fear of becoming irrelevant. For years, she had defined herself through the marriage, through being the steady partner who soothed Bill's anxieties and maintained the facade of order. To lose him meant losing the identity she had curated for most of her adult life. Her anger simmered beneath the surface, cloaked by practiced composure, but it threatened to erupt with every sigh Bill released and every glance he failed to return. She felt the humiliation tightening around her like a constricting band, the sense that everyone else would soon see what she already knew, that she was being replaced, not by circumstance, but by another woman. Dani, meanwhile, struggled under her own tangled motivations. She had never intended to become entangled with Bill beyond professional boundaries, yet the emotional void she carried made his attention feel like oxygen. She told herself she was not responsible for the deterioration of his marriage, that she had merely stepped into a gap that had existed long before her arrival. But at night, when she replayed her choices in the dim glow of her apartment, she felt the guilt spreading like wildfire. She wasn't naive. She knew what it meant to be the reason a man reconsidered his life. She knew the devastation that followed. She had lived it once before, on the other side of the equation. Her determination to break free from the past collided violently with the new attachment forming between her and Bill. She saw his tenderness, his fear, his exhaustion, and it awakened something dangerous, a longing to be chosen, even if it meant someone else would be discarded. She despised herself for wanting that. She despised Hayley for having what she had lost in previous relationships. She despised Bill for being too weak to walk away and too selfish to stay loyal. Yet her anger at all of them blended into an overwhelming, chaotic need, to feel that she mattered, that her presence could shift the world around her, even if it came at a cost. When Bill finally submitted the divorce papers, the reaction in the Dupree community rippled outward like a shockwave. People whispered behind closed doors, speculating about the real reason behind the separation. Some suspected infidelity. Others blamed the relentless pressures of their social environment. Hayley bore the scrutiny with increasing bitterness, feeling judged by the same network she had once supported. Her perfect poise began to fracture under the gaze of neighbors who offered sympathy with shallow sincerity. She felt herself unraveling, not from heartbreak but from humiliation. Her wrath simmered dangerously, fueled by a growing sense that she needed to take control before the narrative consumed her completely. Bill anticipated anger, but he did not anticipate Hayley's silence. Her quiet detachment unnerved him more than any confrontation could have. She moved through the house like a ghost haunting her own life, withholding her grief in a way that magnified his guilt. Every untouched meal, every carefully closed door, every calm gesture pushed him further into self-loathing. He began to question whether Dani was truly the reason for his decision or merely the catalyst that exposed his dissatisfaction. The thought that he might have destroyed his marriage for an illusion gnawed at him relentlessly. Meanwhile, Dani found herself increasingly isolated. She sensed the shift in Bill's behavior as guilt tightened its hold on him, and she feared becoming a symbol of his shame. She knew what came next: resentment, distance, perhaps even blame. She had been the rebound before, the temporary distraction that eventually carried the weight of a man's regret. She tried to detach herself from Bill's turmoil, focusing instead on her own ambitions, but his emotional dependency pulled her back into the chaos. The more he clung to her, the more suffocated she felt. The more he retreated into remorse, the more she feared being abandoned again. As the emotional spiral intensified, outside forces began amplifying the conflict. A rumor spread that Dani had manipulated Bill, using his vulnerabilities to advance her own influence within the community. Hayley's closest confidants whispered this version of the story until it hardened into a widely accepted truth. Dani felt her reputation collapsing under the weight of assumptions she had no power to control. Every sideways glance, every stifled conversation she passed in hallways reminded her that she was no longer seen as an individual, only as the villain in someone else's downfall. The hostility pushed Dani into darker corners of her psyche, awakening a defensive aggression she had tried to suppress for years. She began to withdraw from social spaces, not out of shame but out of self-protection. Her anger transformed into a hard, cold determination to reclaim control over her narrative. She refused to be a casualty of someone else's marriage. She refused to let the world punish her for choices she had not made alone. She refused to surrender to guilt that did not belong solely to her. Hayley's internal conflict reached a breaking point the day she realized she no longer cried over losing Bill, she burned over the indignity of it. She felt stripped of agency, turned into a symbol of weakness by those who speculated about her private life. Her resentment crystallized into something sharp and unforgiving. She did not want Bill back. She wanted justice for the pain she had been forced to endure. She wanted Dani to feel the same instability, the same erosion of confidence, the same panic that had consumed her for weeks. She wanted Bill to understand what it meant to dismantle a life built on trust. Her rage became a silent companion, shaping her every decision. Bill, now caught between two storms, Hayley's quiet wrath and Dani's wounded detachment, found himself spiraling into confusion. He felt like a man who had set fire to his own home and now stood helplessly watching the flames. His motives blurred into something he no longer recognized. What had he been searching for in Dani? Escape? Validation? Freedom? Every answer he considered dissolved into fear that he had misjudged everything, that he had been driven not by clarity but by emotional recklessness. The community's eyes remained fixed on the unraveling triangle, perceiving weakness, scandal, opportunity. Each character felt increasingly cornered by circumstances they had shaped but could no longer control. The collisions between them grew sharper, more volatile, fueled by the pressure of reputation, identity, guilt, longing, and betrayal. Every choice became a new fracture. Every gesture became a battle between fear and desire. Every private emotion threatened to explode into public fallout. As the tension escalated, all three found themselves standing at the edge of transformation. Bill felt the weight of consequences closing in, forcing him to confront the truth he had avoided. He was not a victim of circumstance but the architect of the chaos. Hayley felt power returning to her in the form of unrelenting clarity. She no longer wanted to salvage the past but to carve a future built from strength rather than dependence. Dani felt her old wounds merging with new ones, shaping her into someone both stronger and more guarded, someone unwilling to be collateral damage again. The story between them did not resolve. It evolved, tightening its grip as unresolved emotions tangled into a complicated web of resentment, desire, ambition, and retribution. The divorce was only the beginning, not the end. The true impact would echo through every part of their lives, reshaping alliances, igniting rivalries, and pushing each of them into the darkest corners of their own nature.